The world-famous violinist from France, Jean-Luc Ponty, a man who really got his start in the U.S. playing with Frank Zappa, and two pieces of music with a little montage mixed in between. Jean-Luc Ponty from the album Imaginary Voyage. Once Upon a Dream, and from a previous album before that, a piece of music called Mirage. Starting off the set, Jan Hammer, from also an early album, Don't You Know the name of that piece? 15 minutes before 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, Cincinnati. Luke Banks once again on a Friday afternoon. Gonna go nuts. It's Friday. It's the weekend. And I'll be back in a second.
Hi, I'm Chuka Nyagolo, and this Friday on African Panorama, the countdown of the 20 biggest reggae hits of 1983. Yes, 1983 was definitely the year of reggae music's debut in Cincinnati. Peter Tosh, Eddie Grant, Third World were all part of Cincinnati's humid 1983 summer. And this Friday at 8 p.m., you can hear them all on WVXU's African Panorama. Join me.
That's tonight at 8 o'clock right here on WVXU. The National Wildlife Federation asked, do you take clean water for granted? I certainly do. For some free tips on how you can use water wisely, write to water. That's interesting. National Wildlife Federation, Washington, D.C., zip code 20036. That's cosmic debris.
Sounds exciting to me.
Rob, did you have a good show this afternoon? I heard some bizarre music on the air.
I slipped in a few of my own.
Did you? You're really into hit parade stuff, aren't you? Back in 1949?
49? No,
Yeah.
39.
Good year.
Hey.
What for? I don't know. However, it sounds right. A good year. Yeah,
well, Luke, have a good show.
Thanks, Rob. Rob Phoenix, who does oldies every Friday afternoon, immediately prior to jazz on VXU. Speaking of jazz, a new album into the studios last week. Name of the artist, L, that's the initial L, Subramaniam, an Indian violinist, among other things. Violin, synthesizer, mini harp, percussion. The list goes on. Some very, very interesting new music. Name of the album, Indian Express. This is a piece of music called Grasshopper. This is El Subramaniam on VXU.
Soviets plan to send the two spacecraft to Halley's Comet by way of Venus. The Vegas will deliver probes to study the planet's atmosphere. The Halley mission sponsored by Japan is called Planet A. Like the other three Comet missions, the Japanese will pass on the sunward side of Comet Halley, between the Comet and the Sun. The final spacecraft to visit Halley will be launched by the European Space Agency. This craft is called Giotto. The comet's orbital plane is inclined to the plane of Earth's orbit around the Sun. The spacecraft will encounter Comet Halley where the two orbital planes intersect when the comet is passing through the plane of Earth's orbit. The information these spacecraft send back will be combined with observations made by spacecraft in other parts of the solar system and from Earth's surface to reveal much about the comet that has fascinated Earthlings for many centuries, but only from afar. Our program's called Stardate. We want to send you our free sky calendar and star chart. If you want one, send us a legal-sized, self-addressed, stamped envelope at the University of Texas McDonald Observatory in Austin, zip code 78712. We'll get it in the mail to you, and remember, it's absolutely free. For the McDonald Observatory, I'm Joel Block.
You can hear Stardate every weekday afternoon at 5, 7, and then in the evening at midnight right here, exclusively on WVXU. Just about 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, Cincinnati. Luke Banks here on a Friday afternoon's worth of jazz for the Queen City. A reminder, while we're talking about programming here at the station, tonight at 7:30, right. Tonight, not Suspense. Suspense is off now. The Shadow. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob Anker. The Shadow at 7:30 tonight. Then at 8 o'clock tonight, a very special program of African Panorama. Tonight, Chuka will feature the top 20 reggae hits of 1983. That lasts until 9. Then at 9 o'clock, jazz until midnight. That's the way it looks for a Friday afternoon and evening, and this is the way it looks right now. This is Cincinnati's very own Blue Wisp Big Band on VXU.
awake the dawn with open eyes. I face the truth in children's hearts, taken in life and given out love. That's my style today. I welcome rain upon my hair, sins of my flesh, I don't despair. Laughing and crying, I'm not denying, 'cause that's my groove for now. I'm talking about life without the hang-ups, party time for all, peace for in between times, love is over all. I close my eyes in peaceful slumber, I needn't fear the dark. I love to look at all the ladies, laugh up to the sun. Maybe my needs are greater than deeds. That's how it is with me. At least the Lord and I seem to both agree.
What they call way down Mexican way. Senorita is falling forth in the house that he will stay. what to say. When he's tall and good looking, and he always knows just what to say. By the time that you love him, said your blues has gone away. What they call way down next to Callaway. Senorita is falling for in the hopes that he will stay. By the time that you love him, Senor Blues has gone away. When he's not a good looking, good looking, and they always do just what they say. By the time
Two very interestingly different... I need that. Give me that. Two very interestingly different styles of music from the same artist, Judy Roberts. The latest album, I should say, is the last piece we heard. Judy Roberts with Jeff Hamilton and Ray Brown. Judy Roberts Trio, the name of that piece, Afterthoughts. Before that, from a very early album of hers, I believe her first for Inner City Records, a piece of music called Signal Blues. Before that, Rare Silk, Happying. Yeah, and starting off the set, Cincinnati's very own Blue Wisp Big Band. From their latest album, the smooth one, a piece of music called Yours Is My Heart Alone. How about that? 41 degrees outside. Good afternoon, Cincinnati. Luke Banks here on VXU. What I need is the weather forecast. It just came in over the wires. Tonight, variable cloudiness, low tonight around 30. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy skies. A chance of flurries with a high for Saturday, 35. Saturday night, snow flurries likely with a low around 20. And for Sunday, occasional snow and colder with a high around 23, big ones. Yeah. Chance of precipitation, 20% for tonight, 50% for tomorrow, 60% for Saturday night. Again, 41 degrees outside in Cincinnati. I had considered going down to Lake Cumberland to do some striper fishing. You're welcome, Matt. This weekend, isn't that a joke? Back a few days ago, they were predicting balmy temperatures in the middle to upper 40s for this weekend. Fair skies throughout the weekend. No go on that one. We can forget that. Oh well. Again, 41 degrees outside in Cincinnati. Chance of snow flurries all through this weekend and turning a little bit colder. Stay tuned for sports at 5:30 with Neil Connerman. But in the meantime, this is jazz for a Friday afternoon in Cincinnati. And this is Steve Kahn on VXU.
.91.7 Sports.
Third day of February. Are you sure?
I think.
Really?
Last time I checked it was.
Is this your leap year?
Is this my leap year? No.
How often do you leap? No, this is leap year. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not
There's
know
one
that.
more day in February.
Thank you very much, Luke. You're flowing with knowledge.
Dr. Backwards. What is it? The doctor who spoke backwards? Dr. Backwards? Never.
Me no comprendo.
Sorry, Neil. I know what it was. It was Mr. McBoing Boing. Remember that? Oh, you're too young. Thanks, Neil.
That's right, and you're too old, Luke.
That's right. What am I doing?
Have a good weekend at any rate.
Thanks. You too, Neil. 25 minutes before 6 o'clock. Welcome to Jazz on a Friday afternoon. I'm Luke Banks until 7:30 tonight here playing jazz for the Queen City. This is Brian Auger and Search Party. Voyager 3 calling on VXU. Brian Auger and a group called Search Party. Name of that piece, Tranquility Base here. From what I understand to be his latest album, that is, I have not seen anything come out of Brian Auger since then. This album recorded, by the way, in January of 1980. That was a little over 4 years ago. The album was done on digital tape, or recorded digitally, I should say, which is also a first for Brian Auger. He did it on the record, what would you call it? Audiophile record label Head First. They specialize in audiophile albums and pressings and do a lot of digital stuff. Again, Brian Auger, and this time a group of people called Search Party. Produced by Brian Auger. Name of the album, Search Party. Nice, huh? Planet Earth calling the name of that one. 18 minutes now before 6 o'clock. Good evening. I'm Luke Banks here on WVXU. Scarlet Oaks Career Development Campus invites the public to their annual open house. That's the 12th of February, Sunday, from 2 to 4 p.m. That's a week from this Sunday. If you would like more information, I have a number for you to call, as usual, 771-8810. 771-8810. 41 degrees outside in Cincinnati. A bit of snow in the forecast for Cincinnati this weekend. On and off, I expect flurries Saturday and Sunday as well. Also cooling off a bit. Not good news. I'll have a complete forecast for you with the news at 6 o'clock. But until then, this is jazz. That's the protocol for the afternoon. And this is Mitch Farber, the title cut of his debut album released about 6 months ago called Star Climber. This is Mitch Farber on VXU. Shorty Rogers and Bud Shank on WVXU from a recent release entitled Yesterday, Today, and Forever. Diamonds are forever. No. Some nice cooking jazz there. Some nice horn work. Released on Concord Record, that piece of music appropriately titled TNT. 6 minutes now before 6 o'clock. Good evening. I'm Luke Banks. 40 degrees outside. Not too good for the weekend, unfortunately. Not horribly bad, though. Some snow flurries in store. Matt Reese will have the complete forecast along with the news. That's about 6 minutes from now. And I'll be back with another piece from the sports... thank you. From our incredible music library from Dave Grusin. Right after this. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Chuka Nyagolo, and this Friday on African Panorama, the countdown of the 20 biggest reggae hits of 1983. Yes, 1983 was definitely the year of reggae music's debut in Cincinnati. Peter Tosh, Eddie Grant, Third World were all part of Cincinnati's humid 1983 summer. And this Friday at 8 p.m., you can hear them all on WVXU's African Panorama. Join me.
That's tonight at 8 o'clock, immediately following The Shadow on VXU. Well, as promised, that incredible piece of music. This is, by the way, an album Dave Grusin released on Sheffield Lab label, on Sheffield Lab Records, I should say. The first album he did after a long pause from recording. A direct-to-disc album that increases the fidelity of the reproduction on the album, by the way. It's a little bit like a live session in a recording studio. No overdubbing, no remix, no taking out of the goofs or anything like that. And they do that, you know. However, none of that. This is real stuff. This is reality right here. Name of the album, Dave Grusin Discovered Again. This is a Sheffield Lab release about 3 years ago, I would say now. Keep Your Eye on the Sparrow, the name of this one. Dave Grusin. This cooks on VXU.
You're listening to WVXU-FM Cincinnati. The National Weather Service says we may see some flurries this weekend. The complete forecast coming up. Debate on whether El Salvador should receive aid from the United States continues. President Reagan is suggesting $312 million be given to the South American country.
Our plan is for the long haul. It won't be easy, and it won't be cheap, but it can be done. And for strategic and moral reasons, it must be done.
Reagan is acting on Kissinger Commission recommendations. He says spending will be tied to human rights progress in El Salvador. Good evening, I'm Matt Reese. This is WVXU News at 6 o'clock. It's 40 degrees. Within the past hour, astronauts aboard the space shuttle aboard the spaceship Challenger launched a communication satellite. The satellite is for Western Union and could earn Uncle Sam $10 million. Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs Committee has yet to vote on marine withdrawal from Lebanon. Action on the measure has been delayed until next Tuesday. Looking for a job? Economists say employment opportunities are better. The employment rate fell to 8% last month, and domestic sales for U.S. car makers are also up. In fact, they skyrocketed. It's the best performance since '79, and wouldn't you know it, Chrysler leads the pack. Ohio Congressman Bill Gradison says General Electric in Evendale will be awarded 75% of a contract to build Air Force jet engines. GE has been fighting hard to obtain the contract from a Connecticut-based company, Pratt & Whitney. They had a virtual monopoly on production of Air Force engines. And finally, bad news for Smurf fans. Musical crib train toys are being recalled. Closing Dow Jones Industrials were down almost 17 points at 1197.03. It's 6:02. Here's a look at the revised forecast from the National Weather Service. Variable cloudiness tonight, low of 30 degrees. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, chance of flurries, high in the 30s. Tomorrow night, snow flurries likely again, low of 20 degrees. And on Sunday, occasional snow and much colder, high 25. Chance precipitation 20% tonight, 50% tomorrow, and 60% tomorrow night. It's currently 40 degrees in Cincinnati. I'm Matt Reese, WVXU News.
Portions of today's jazz programming are made possible in part by a grant from Henry A. Leist Realtors, Carousel Towers.
The Fraser McPherson Quartet. Name of the album, Indian Summer. Released about 6 weeks ago from Concord Jazz. Name of that piece, Just My Luck. That's the right? Before that, Marcio Monterroyos. Also a brand new album. This one into the studios last week on Columbia Records. A piece from the album entitled Ocean Dance. 14 and a half after 6. Good evening, everybody. Luke Banks doing jazz for a Friday here on VXU. 40 degrees outside. That's the best it's going to get for some time now. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. Stay tuned.
Excuse me, but that's quite a hole you're digging.
Yep. I'm burying today's misconceptions about epilepsy.
You mean misconceptions?
No, mythconceptions. Like people with epilepsy aren't very intelligent.
That's a myth?
Well, of course. People with epilepsy have the same range of mental abilities as the general population. All they need is for the rest of us to give them a chance.
Epilepsy. Find out where we are today. Write Epilepsy Foundation of America, Washington, D.C., 20013.
Weather forecast looks like this. Tonight, variable cloudiness, low around 30. For Saturday, mostly cloudy skies. Chance of snow flurries for tomorrow. The high tomorrow around 35. Big deal. Saturday night, snow flurries likely. Another big deal. Low tomorrow night, 20. And Sunday, occasional snow and colder. Good news, everybody. High for Sunday, 23 big ones. Chance of precipitation, 20% for tonight. 50% for tomorrow. 60% for Saturday night. Everybody get all juded out to go out on a Saturday night and you get snowed on, right? 40 degrees outside in Cincinnati right now. Enjoy it while you can. It's not going to be here too much longer. However, I will, at least for an hour and 15 minutes or so. And I'll be doing my best at a game called Jazz. This is the way we play it with Pat Metheny on VXU.